Hello everyone and welcome to Simplilearn's YouTube channel. Kaushal this side and I hope you guys are doing well. Today we are going to discuss animations in JavaScript. We go through several websites and see things like hovering over something and it changes a bit. These are known as animations. We see that an image zooms out on hovering over that in some websites like Amazon. Is it possible with JavaScript? Yes, it is. We'll find out how in this particular video. So before we begin, make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel and press that bell icon to never miss any updates from Simplilearn. So without any further delay, let's get started. You can see we have an image slider over here. The images present inside this box keep on changing. We can also click on these radio buttons to go over a specific image. If we click on this last radio button, you can see we are moving to that particular image. Now suppose you go through the home page of any website like Amazon or Flipkart. You will notice that these websites contain such image sliders at the top for different type of sales and offers going on, right? That looks quite nice. So we'll do something interesting in today's video. We'll go over some specific animations like fading of an image on several events. We'll see how easy it is to make those style changes in JavaScript, which we can't do with CSS or HTML. We are particularly talking about style changes during events. So talking about style changes, we have done it in the past using CSS and HTML and JavaScript of course. So guys, we generally say that JavaScript is used to make a web page more interactive, right? To make a web page more interactive or engaging, we have to do something nice to it. So adding fade in and fade out animations to a picture makes the web page more engaging to the user. So what we'll do today is we'll take an image and use specific JavaScript properties to make changes in that image. Let's move on to the VS Code and you will understand it much better. Now let's add an image to the web page first. So we have a picture on our computer and we'll add it. So what we'll do is we'll write here img src source will be html.png and the next thing we'll be using the alt attribute. We'll write here, let's say JavaScript. So we can take any random image. We are doing this for experimental purpose only. So what we'll do next is we'll close this img tag, we'll save it, and here you can see we have an image over here. We'll reduce the size, and so this is the perfect size I guess. Now what we'll do next is we'll use the ID attribute as well because we need to access this particular image. So let's say the ID is img. Fine. Now here we have an image and we have two possibilities to perform those animations. Either we can add two buttons and add functionality to them, or we can use the on mouse over and on mouse out events. So we'll use two buttons for now and then we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out events to do the same task. Now let's add two buttons here. What we'll do is we'll write here input type is equals to button, and then we'll write here value. Value will be, let's say, fade in for first button, and we'll use the on click event. Fine. So we'll write here on click and we'll call a function on clicking this particular button. So this will be a function name fade in. Now we'll do similar thing again. We'll copy paste it and we'll change certain values here. We'll write here fade out and we'll call a different function. So we'll write here fade out. Fine. Now save it and you can see we have two buttons over here, fade in and fade out. So nothing is happening on clicking over these buttons. We can change the size of this image using CSS, right? So we'll use CSS here only. We'll write here class is equals to, let's say, size, and we'll use the style tag here. We'll write here dot size, and inside this we'll write width is equals to 50 pixels, let's say, and the height will be 50 pixels as well. Fine. Save it and you can see the image is pretty small right now. So what we'll do is we'll write here 250 instead of 50. Save it now, and you can see it's working fine, I guess. The size is decent. Let's change it to 300. Fine. So we have to keep these things in mind, like what size we want for our image, and we can use CSS for that, right? That's quite easy. What we did is we defined a class. We use the class attribute here inside the img tag, and we have defined it using the style tag over here. We are not using any separate CSS file for that. So save it, and you can see we have our image over here with decent size, and then we have two buttons, fade in and fade out. Now the next task for us is to add functionality to these buttons. We'll move on to the JavaScript file and create our functions there. So this is our JavaScript file. We'll create a function here. Let's say the function name is fade in. So this is the first function, and then we have the body of this function. Now the next thing is to use the style property to fade this image. Let's talk about it in detail. We need to access this image, right? So we'll use the document.getElementById method to access the image. We have already used the ID attribute in the HTML file. So what we'll do here is we'll write here document.getElementById, and the ID is img. Fine. Now we have to use the style property. The style property is used to add styling to any particular element or event with the help of JavaScript. We can do it with CSS, but we want to add styling as a functionality, right? This means that we want to style an element or image by clicking a button. For that, we have to use the style property here in our JavaScript file. So we'll write here style. Now the next and the last thing is fading the image. Now we have a term named opacity in programming. Opacity refers to the fact of being opaque. In programming, if the value of opacity is 1, then we can't see through the image, like making an image transparent. And if the value is 0, we can see through that image, or we can say that the image will totally disappear if the value is 0. So let's try it out here, and you'll understand it. So what we'll do is we'll write here style.opacity is equals to 0. Now save it and click on this fade in button. Click on this fade in button, and you can see the image disappears by clicking the fade in button. Now we'll add functionality to this fade out button as well. For that, what we have to do is we have to create another function here. So the function name will be fade out, and then we have the body of this function. The working will remain the same. We'll again use the document.getElementById method. We'll again use the img as id. We'll write here .style.opacity. Now what we want is we want to bring back our image, right? So we'll write here 1. Now here the values are 0 and 1 respectively for fade in and fade out functions. Let's check the output here. Save it. Click on this fade in button, and you can see the image totally disappears. And on clicking the fade out button, you can see the image is here again. Now to actually make the image a slight fade, let's say we don't want the image to be disappeared completely. What we want is a slight fade in an image. Now what we have to do is we have to choose a value between 0 and 1. Like for 0, it totally disappears, right? If we write here 0.5, save it now and click on fade in, you can see the image fades slightly. So this is how we can use the fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript, and it will be totally fine if we write here 0.1 as well. Save it, and if you click on this fade in button, you can see we have this image over here still, but we can say it's almost transparent or disappearing. You can see it's over here. Maybe it's visible or maybe not, but if you write here 0.3 or something like that, and now click on this fade in button, you can see we can see this image, but the image is faded, right? So this is how we can use the fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript. Now we can do the same thing using on mouse over and on mouse out events in JavaScript. We have to make some more minor changes in a HTML file only. Instead of using these buttons, we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out events inside the img tag. So what we'll do is, let's do it as well. We'll move to our HTML file and we'll comment these two lines. So we are done with it. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out event, right? So we'll write here on mouse over first, and we'll call the fade in function on taking the mouse cursor over the image, and the second event will be on mouse out. So we'll write here on mouse out and we'll call the fade out function, fine, on taking the mouse cursor away from the image. Save it, and you can see we don't have any buttons over here now. Now on taking the mouse cursor over this image, you can see the image fades a bit, and on taking the mouse cursor away from the image, you can see we have the original image here. So this is how we can make fade in and fade out animations work in JavaScript. You might hear that browsers do not support this method of using fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript. In my case, I have checked with 3-4 different browsers like Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome and Internet Explorer. So it is working totally fine. I want you guys to check if it is working or not with the browsers you have on your computer. If not, then do let us know in the comments and we'll figure it out. Make sure that you have the latest version of whichever browser you are using. The fade in and fade out effect in JavaScript was easy to use. All we have to do is to use the style property with opacity in between 0 and 1. Quite a simple task, right? Now in this video, we'll see another animation effect in which we'll change the size of an image by hovering over that. We see such animations in many e-commerce websites where if we take the mouse cursor over any product, the size increases. So let's do it here. It's a simple task. We'll add an image to our HTML file first. So we'll write here img, and the source will be, we have an image named as coffee.png in our system, and then we have the id attribute. The id will be, let's say, img, and then we'll use the alt attribute here. We'll write here coffee. Let's assume that this is a product of any e-commerce website and we want to increase the size of this product on hovering over that. So the next thing we'll be doing here is we'll be defining the width. So let's say the width will be 200 pixel for this particular image, and then we'll use certain events here. So we'll use the on mouse over. So on taking the mouse cursor over, we want to increase the size of this image, right? And on taking the mouse cursor away, we want to decrease the size, right? So we have used these two functions. We'll define these functions in our JavaScript file. So we are done with this img tag. Save it, and you can see we have an image over here in a browser. So we are done with it. We have the default size of this image as 200 pixels. We can change it here. We can make it 300 or 400 or any size we want. So you can see the image size change if we write here 300 instead of 200. So for now we'll be using 200. That's fine, I guess. So what we want is we want to increase the size of this image by taking the mouse cursor over it, right? And the size will be back to normal if we take the cursor away from the image. So for that, we have to define these two functions, increase and decrease. So let's define them in a JavaScript file. What we'll do is we'll first write here function, and we'll define function increase. Then we have the body of this function, and we'll write here document dot get element by id. The id is img, and we'll write here dot style dot width is equals to, we can't write here 400 pixels simply, it will throw an error. You can see a red line over here. So what we have to do is we have to write this inside single inverted commas, right? Save it, and on taking the mouse cursor over the image, you can see the image size increases, but it's not getting back to its original size because we haven't declared the decrease function yet. Let's declare the decrease function as well. So what we'll do is we'll again use the same logic. We'll write here function decrease, and inside the body we'll write document dot get element by id. We'll write here img dot style dot width is equals to, the width, let's say, will be default, so the width will be 200 pixels. We'll write here 200 pixels, and the decrease function will make the picture get back to its original size, that is 200 pixels. So save it, and you can see here on the browser that the image is zooming in and out on specific mouse events. That is one of the most easiest tasks to do in JavaScript. All we had to do is we had to define two functions, a function increase and the other one for decreasing the size. So the function increase will increase the size by 200 pixels and the function decrease will get the image back to its original form. Fine. Now there is an older method of changing the size of an image using the setInterval method. HTML5 documents no longer support this method. So suppose that we want the size of the image to grow gradually. Like after every 10 milliseconds, the size should increase up to a certain level. All we have to do is to use the setInterval method. We are all aware of this concept in JavaScript. So let's take a look at the HTML part. So here's the HTML part, which is the same as we used for the previous program. Not even a single change here. You can see we have the image source as coffee.png. Then we have the ID as img1. Then we have used two mouse over events, one to increase the size and the other one to decrease the size. And then we have the width as 100. We have changed the width here. The initial width will be 100 and we'll notice that the initial image size is smaller than the one we used in the previous program. Now the JavaScript file will look different. Let's move there first. So here's the JavaScript part and we have three variables here: width, addition and interval ID. Now the initial value of width is the same as that of image, which is 100, and then we have the variable addition, which will be responsible for the increment of the size, as we want the size to be incremented by 2 pixels after every 10 milliseconds, right? The following variable is interval ID, which we'll need later on while using the setInterval method. Now we have two functions over here, the increase function and the decrease function. So these are the two functions we have in a JavaScript file. Inside the increase function, we have used the setInterval method. You can see here we have the setInterval method and we have called the zoom in function after every 10 milliseconds. So it will call the zoom in functions again and again after 10 milliseconds. So if we want to make it 1 second, we have to write here 1000, right? We are already aware of this concept, so we are using milliseconds for now. Now if we remove this clear interval method from here, then the zoom in and zoom out effect will not work correctly in between. We'll try it later. So same as the case for decrease function as well, and it will call the zoom out function after every 10 milliseconds, right? So we have to define these two functions as well. So here are the functions zoom in and zoom out. So let's take a look at the zoom in function first. The zoom in function is actually responsible for the increment in the size of the image. If the width is less than 200, let's suppose the initial width is 100, which is less than 200, right? Then what will happen is the value of width will be increased by width plus addition. It will be increased by 2. So it will check if the width is less than 100, the value will be 102. Then 104, 6, 8, 10 up to 200. And then the value will be assigned to the style property to increase the size. So this statement is we are using for a long time now. So what we are doing is we are assigning the value of this width to this style property. And then we have used the console.log to check the increase in width. Now the else statement will stop the setInterval function and the increment in image size will be stopped as soon as it reaches the 200 mark. For the value of width as 200, the setInterval function will stop. Same as the case for zoom out function, which will decrease the size of the image until the size reaches 0. The size will be reduced by 2 after every 10 milliseconds. The logic remains the same. What we are doing is we are using here minus instead of plus, and we are checking if the value of width is greater than 100. Fine. So let's check the output of this program, save it, and we'll open this file with live server. We'll click on live server. Now here we are on the browser and take the mouse cursor over the image. Oh, it's not working. The reason behind it is this method is not supported by the current version of HTML. To make this program work, we have to put our browser in quirk mode. Now for that, we have to do a simple task. We have to go to a HTML file and we have to remove this particular statement. We have to remove this doc type as HTML. Remove it. Now this quirk mode is used to make older websites compatible with the browser. If your program doesn't work sometimes, do check this out by removing doc type from your HTML file. Sometimes it happens that a particular method or a particular type of program doesn't support in your browser. So do check this method out. Try running your program in Quark mode and maybe it will work. So let's check the output now. See, on taking the mouse cursor over here, the image size increases gradually, and on taking the mouse cursor away, the size decreases. It looks nice, right? Now imagine you are working on an e-commerce website and you want to make your website more interactive. Then you can put this effect over products and it will look nicer, right? So we have already mentioned it that what if we remove this clear interval method. So we'll move to a JavaScript file and we'll see what if we remove this particular clear interval method from it. So we'll remove these clear interval methods. We'll remove this one and this one. Save it now. And you can see there is something wrong on taking the mouse cursor over this image. So you can see the image is shaking slightly, right? Now this is because the clear interval method does not stop the set interval method on calling the increase and decrease function every time. So this is how we can make our web pages more beautiful and interactive in JavaScript. Try doing something new by yourself and let us know in the comments what new you learned. And with that, we come to the end of this animations in JavaScript tutorial. If you enjoyed watching the video, do give it a thumbs up, comment your doubts below and our experts will answer them for you. Thank you so much for being here. Watch out for more videos from us. Until then, keep learning and stay tuned to Simplilearn.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.